Morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope you're all well. Find yourself in great spirits and looking forward to a good weekend. Today, I'm going to do a movie review of Wakanda. Spoiler, don't watch if you don't want to have the movie explained to you and what happened. And I hope to do it through the lens of systemic racism. So, before watching the movie, I'd read news articles, La Jornada, other publications in Mexico that talked about the movie. I read the comments because you often get a lot more of a pulse in the comments than you do the actual article. And generally speaking, the mood in Mexico towards this movie, from what I read, was positive. There were articles about the music score being composed and created by a Mayan music composer who finally got his due. There was celebratory articles about Tenoch Huerta, an indigenous actor, being chosen for it because indigenous actors in Mexico were finally getting their due. Generally, growing up, the novelas or the TV shows I saw in Spanish, and we watched Spanish TV most of the time, the people who were elevated as higher were, these tall, blonde, blue-eyed, you know, Spanish-speaking women. Venezuela had a lot of them. They were like the big shots of the '80s for Latino culture, um, and these European features are what was celebrated. And indigenous people were often portrayed as backwards bumpkins, um, sometimes closer to animals than higher beings. And the same happened here, with black folks, with Native Americans, with Chinese. um, these negative tropes about us, Jewish people, all these people of color have been often portrayed in tropes that um, dehumanized us. And so there was celebration that that wasn't the case from the Mexican media and public. There was celebration and news articles I read about the large contingent of Mayan heritage consultants, Mayan people that still live and know their traditions, being brought to consult on the movie to give it um, a legitimacy and to ensure the portrayal wasn't a caricature that was unflattering of the Mayan culture. And in the movie, they are Mayans who saw oppression, uh, smallpox, disease at the hands of the Spaniards, and so they fled into the ocean um, after taking this concoction that allowed them to breathe underwater. And they built a Mayan empire under the water that was peaceful, that was a utopia. And my understanding of Mayan people was generally that they were more academic and fascinated with exploring the world than warmongering. Um, and before seeing the movie as well, I had caught a YouTube clip where this Latina woman was complaining about the movie, and and then a black guy was doing a reaction video to her, and he was empathizing with her. Hey, come on, black folks, we can't be making movies that Latinas find offensive if we're trying to build bridges. And so I thought, damn, what happened in the movie? So I also went with that in mind, and and then I saw the movie, and I didn't find anything offensive about how the Mayan people were portrayed. I think their leader, played by Tenoch Huerta, was pretty hell bent on killing this woman who had the potential to be exploited by the government. The colonialist is how they're referred to in the movie, for her intelligence, and that would lead to the end of the Mayan Empire. And so he wanted to kill her not because he was a bloodthirsty individual, not because he was a warmonger, but because he wanted to protect his empire. And the reason I mentioned that is because in the play Zoot Suit, there's a scene where Henry Reyna is on trial for the murder of a rival gang member that happened at the Sleepy Lagoon. And during the trial, the DA, portrayed by a white guy in a suit, tells the jury, Henry Reyna, he did it. He comes from the Aztec people, a bloodthirsty tribe that did human sacrifices. How could he not be a killer? That's all he is, or something to that effect. I'm not quoting it verbatim. And then the Pachuco spirit, which is the conscience of the gang member, tells him, Ponte las plumas ese, que ya te chingaron. Which means you might as well put your feathers on because you're fucked. And the Zoot Suit wasn't trying to portray us like that. James Ambrose Olmos was trying to teach the audience who were Chicanos and Mexican Americans and Latinos and brown folks, that this is how you're seen. This is how you're often perceived. And to some people. And so I was kind of sensitive to that when I watched the movie. And I don't think that the leader of the Mayans was portrayed as anything other than a man doing everything he can to protect his people. He wasn't out to conquer other people. He wasn't, wanting to kill people because he had a bloodlust or anything. It was one person, and it was to protect his kingdom. I thought the costumes they wore, and how they were portrayed, the peacefulness and tranquility and the beauty of their kingdom was a compliment. And throughout the movie, I believe they were speaking actual Mayan because they had these consultants that were celebrated as speaking for their people and being able to convey the nuances of the culture for this movie. I thought it was done beautifully. If I'm wrong, if you saw something, please let me know. If I change my mind, that's a good thing. It means I learned something. I'm not hell-bent on being right or, there's nothing wrong there. But I didn't see it. I liked how they were portrayed. It showed them before they went underwater and suffering at the hands of the colonialist. And that's a theme throughout the movie. When he has a discussion with the princess from Wakanda, they talk about the colonialists and how they've always been exploited for resources. And the folks from Wakanda in the movie kind of at the start go to a United Nations meeting. And the United Nations is portrayed by all these white folks and countries, and they're coming down on Wakanda because Wakanda has this element. I think it's made up. I don't recall it being on the periodic table of elements. Not that I have it memorized or anything. It never jumped out at me. It could be a real one. But they have this mineral, and the United Nations are saying, you guys are hoarding this. You're not looking out for the interest of the world. And the Wakandans say, and they want it because this element has a potential for creating weapons of mass destruction. That's what's established early on. The United Nations says, hey, this element can create weapons of mass destruction. You have it all. That seems like aggression to everyone else, and you need to share it with us. And the Wakandans say, we're not afraid of what this element can do. We're afraid of what you will do with it. And so early on, there's this impression given that the governments of the world, led by white people, will take something that could be helpful to humanity and instead use it to exploit and oppress humanity. That's established as part of the storyline. And the FBI and the CIA, they're trying to steal this element from the Wakandans, and they're all portrayed by white folks. Julia Louise Dreyfus, Elaine from Seinfeld, is the head of the FBI. And in one scene, there's this white dude who helps the Wakandans. He's like a pretty noble white dude. And he tells her, can you imagine how bad we would exploit people and abuse them if we had a hold of that element? He says the U.S. would. And she says, oh, I dream about it every day. Like, she represents the government in this movie, and she's telling you she wants it to oppress people. And so there's this understanding between the Wakandans and the Mayans that the government of the world, led by white folks, will oppress them given the opportunity. But they have a falling out. They can't come to an agreement, and both sides are fairly noble. I was looking for a portrayal of the Mayans as like this bloodthirsty person, and I didn't see that. I don't think he was portrayed as any more unnoble than he was as noble as everyone else in the movie, even though he kind of played the villain or the anti-villain or I don't know the terms, but anyways, that was kind of through the lens of systemic racism. Nothing jumped out at me about the portrayal of the Mayans, but a couple of things did jump out at me about the portrayal of the Wakandans. I don't claim to speak for black people. I don't. I don't claim to speak for them. I do have friends who are advocates and are black and just have the utmost integrity. And honestly, I would call them my brothers and sisters because we've generally been united against everyone else of all ethnicities in this advocacy. I've never seen her in particular promote herself. It's always she brought the community to speak for themselves. It was always about them, serving them, and we even share, religious beliefs. So it's my sister, and given that, I do hear from black folks. I watch comedy skits from black folks. I listen to black politicians when they speak about equity. John Lewis, I was a big fan of his rhetoric. Good trouble. And so, as it relates to black folks, I did see some things that kind of jumped out at me about the movie. The first one was that throughout the movie, Wakanda is portrayed as a matriarchal society, meaning women run it. They're at the top of the food chain, and the black men in it are portrayed as less flattering. So the Wakandans had this ritual before I think they go off to battle. She took a concoction, and you have a vision, and the vision will tell you how to proceed. And the vision she had was of her cousin, who was, portrayed as like kind of a street thug, but in Wakanda and in Wakandan clothes. But his mannerisms and the way he talked was very street culture. And he tells her, are you going to be noble or are you going to handle business like I did? And it's kind of conveyed that he's all about revenge, and he's pushing her to be vengeful because her the at this point the Mayans and the Wakandans, they're having conflict. And the other kind of key black men were Wakanda had these different tribes. In the movie, it's portrayed as this kingdom of different tribes that all get along, they come together and they have discussions. And there's one tribe of black men who, they got 20s on the hang, big ass arms, barrel chests, just big brothers, think Ving Rames and the the guy who would open his mouth and the bees came out in that prison movie. He's like a gentle giant, but a big dude. Big brothers like that, and they're portrayed. There is one brother that's portrayed cool, who kind of guides the princess, but the other ones were portrayed, as needing the princess to lead them. And the ones with the big arms, the ones that were like the strongest looking, and that when they got in a battle, they had a battle with the Mayans, and after they won the battle, they started beating their chests. And because I've been watching YouTube videos of like gorillas fighting and stuff, to me, it was reinforcing a trope that didn't need to be reinforced, going back to the eugenics and how, all people of color and blacks in incredible amounts have been portrayed as, less than their white counterparts who thought higher and whatnot. And so that beating of the chest, to me, kind of just reinforced a trope, because it reinforced a trope. And not all of the Wakandans did it. Again, there were different tribes. But this tribe, after they won, they were beating their chest like this. And um, that I think probably didn't need to be there. And then going back to the matriarchal society, I've heard from black folks, I've read in articles, and I understand that this is a concern with some black folks, a lot of them, and it's that there's a belief that the government, through laws that unfairly punished black folks over white folks, an example being, if you had a kilogram of cocaine or 5 keys of cocaine, 5,000 grams, I think, you could get months in prison. But if you had 5 grams of crack, you had to get a mandatory minimum of 5 years. Most of the people caught with crack, because it was cheap, were black. Most of the people caught with cocaine were white. The people bringing in the cocaine, the people that had the big amounts of cocaine, would get less time than a black man with a little bit of crack. And at the time, I think everybody was in support of the laws, black folks, white folks, Latinos that were in Congress. It was the government in its entirety, with all the people of color there, generally supported that. And it seems to, the conversation is that it took a generation of fathers out of the homes and made the black community a matriarchal community. Um, I've heard talks about Big Mama. There's a mom that oversees this household, and people come and go. She's the homeowner, and she's the matriarch of the family. Um, that I think was reinforced with the movie, and that the black men who had key roles, um, were not portrayed as, one was the cousin who made it a point to say, are you going to be noble or take care of business? So by default, he's telling you he's unnoble. The other ones beating their chests were behaving in line with what a eugenics racist would say about how people act, the tropes. I know black folks like the movie. I'm not speaking for them. I'm just sharing what I saw, given everything I've heard in my life, um, and what have you. And the other thing is, in my life, when I look at a lot of governmental agencies, they are run by women of color and black women, Mexican women, and women of color. I've not seen that be, I've not seen that lead to real change in the poorest black and brown communities. I don't think a guy being there would make any difference, whether he's brown or black or what have you. I'm not saying a man would do a better job than a woman. But being sensitive to what I've heard, and at its worst, it being that men of color are being emasculated from roles of leadership and guidance. I can kind of see that being conveyed with the movie for the black community. The Mayans, they had a strong man leader, and he was portrayed as a noble person, I thought. That doesn't mean that had a woman been there, um, that she couldn't be noble and strong as well. You know, the women from the Wakanda movie, from the Wakanda kingdom, they were um, they were very human, um, good people. You know that they were just fighting for their people, to preserve them, but trying to find peace, trying to find ways to not be that way. And so, like I said, personally, I see a lot of women of color in government positions, leading government, and that's cool. That's cool. But I don't think it's cool if they're there because that's supposed to represent equity and change, and the communities they're supposed to be helping to change. I mean, it's not equitable. Well, I don't know. It's not equitable if you give a person of color a position of power, and that power is used to uplift themselves in their career, and the communities that they're supposed to represent in that position of power don't even know them. They don't know them. And so I won't go too far because I don't want it to be conveyed that a man needs to do a job because a woman can't do it as good. That's not what I'm saying. In my homeless advocacy, I'm not saying I don't want homeless shelter in my community. I'm saying it's racist for you to put all of them in my community because it's a black and brown community. If you don't put any in a white community and they're all in black and brown communities, that's fucking racist. And it's not because I don't like homeless people. It has nothing to do with that. Same thing with this matriarchal thing. Women can do what guys can do. But if you consciously put women in power because you're afraid of a black man or a brown man being in that position of power, as whoever is up there making these decisions, then that's wrong too. So I wasn't gonna make this movie, but something happened at the end that I thought was pretty cool and an omen to make this video. So towards the end, the Wakandans and the Mayans, they're fighting on this ship, and off somewhere else, the princess, the new Black Panther, and Tenoch Huerta, the leader of Colcucan, the Mayan king, they're fighting. And he needs water to be strong, and he hasn't been around water for a while, so he's getting weaker. And it gets to a point where the princess of Wakanda has a knife to his throat and is in a position to kill him. And up to that point, she seems hell bent on revenge because the Wakandans are attacking them. They're not going to let them live in peace. The Mayans are attacking them and are not going to let them live in peace until this girl gets killed. And so they're all fighting on this ship, and this other ship pulls up, and it's Tenok and the new Black Panther, the princess. And they're together, and they tell their people to stand down, and they understand that they come to an agreement. They're going to live in peace. They're going to support one another against the colonists coming against them because they both know it's coming. They're going to come for them. And so I like that. It ended with, black and brown unity. And then the movie was over. I went home, pulled up, reached in my pocket, and was like, fudge sickles. I never, ever, ever lose my phone. And it was gone. And I was like, oh, shit. So I come home, ask my wife to call it. I run in the car. I'm listening. It's not going off. I done tore up the car. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go back to the movie theater. So I turn around, jump in the car. I'm like mashing. I get to the movie theater, jump out the car. I'm running up. And there's a brother outside. He goes, hey. And I look. He goes, hey, come here. And I look at him, and then he holds up the phone. He goes, this you? And I go over there, and I'm like, man, thank you so much. I only have $5 on me because I just, I bought popcorn and stuff. I only have $5 left, and I'm like, man, I only got $5, and can I get you something inside with my card? He's like, no. He was smoking a Newport, so I was like, hey, man, I don't normally smoke. I'm kind of stressed out. Can I get a cigarette? So we walked to his car, gave me a Newport. Kind of explained, look, man, that's an Apple phone. They're hard to crack. They'd have to take it to an Apple store, do this, and this. So if you lose it again, it gets reported. Anyone tries to hack it, they'll take it and call the cops on him. And he was tatted up. He carried himself like a G cat, And it was cool because the movie ended on the black and brown unity thing. I lost my phone. I'm driving there. I'm like, God, please let a good person find it. And I pulled up, and there was this brother out there. He's tatted up too, and had my phone. We chopped it up for a little while, smoked a cigarette, shook his hand, thanked him, and it came home. And I thought, man, I got to make a video because I saw this movie. It ended on that good note, and then. After that, a brother found my phone and held it for me, and I got it back. And so I'm glad I saw it. I hope you guys watch it. And, much love to everybody. Again, I don't claim to speak for black folks. I'm just sharing things that I saw where I've heard concerns from other black folks about those things. And, just to be... just to elaborate on how I see racism everywhere. If it rains hard and I drive down Franklin Boulevard, there might be a lot of potholes. And I'll be like, man, we got all these potholes here. And they did redo the street. But I'll be like, man, there's a lot of potholes here because it's a truck route. And it's a truck route because local governments always put trucking industries near poor neighborhoods. They don't put them in rich neighborhoods. And so our streets are the streets that the big rigs use to get on the freeway. They take a toll on the roads. So when it rains, those roads get potholes. Now, this is a poorer community. It's a low-income community. We are probably the ones who can least afford to be getting suspension redone, alignments, because our car is being torn up by the potholes. And so I see racism in potholes. Most people don't, but I know that pothole is there in part because of land use decisions the government made that disfavored us because we were people of color. And the consequence is that We have to spend more money on maintaining our alignment, our suspension, our car, because of those decisions that were made. And so, highly sensitive to it. Apologies if anyone feels offended by my interpretations of what I saw. And I will say, with that matriarchal society of women of color, I have seen skits from brothers who are like, yeah, man, this dude got fired, and he was a slacker, but when they ask him why'd you get fired, and everyone knows he's a slacker, he says, man, they always got a sister up in HR to do the brothers in, and when he said that, it was funny to me because I saw that, I saw that, and and then there was after the Cedillo, Nunez, and Leon comments at the first city council meeting, this brother shows up and he says, I'm going to say this respectfully, but all you guys up there and other people of color, when you get in these positions of power, you get really comfortable and you forget who you were there to actually look out for. I've seen so much tokenism with everyone, men and women alike. I've not seen men have more integrity than women when it comes to selling out for personal ambition. But I do see that in selecting who they're going to tokenize, they seem to favor women over men, and it sucks. So, anyways, much love. I hope you guys have a good one. Thank you, Shy. That was the brother that found my phone, was out there waiting. He was missing the movie. So he said he sat down to watch the movie. When it was started, he heard the phone ring. So he pulled it out of the seat, because they have seats you can lay down in. And he pulled it out of the seat and he saw my number, but he couldn't open it. So he called the number and my wife answered, and he's like, oh, he's on his way over there to look for it. And he said, what's he look like? And she described me. And so that's why he yelled at me when I was running up to the theater. And all's well that ends well. If you guys can go watch the movie, I think it's a good movie. I did hear someone say they were appropriating our culture, and I'm like, dude, trust me. People in Mexico, the Mayan consultants, I'm gonna take their word over whatever your hack thoughts are. Peace out.